Hello, podcast listeners. We know podcasts are a great way to catch up on a program that you may have missed on KSJE, and it's provided as a free service of this radio station. But you know, KSJE is now listener-supported, and so while you enjoy this podcast, we hope that you'll also take some time to join KSJE. Become a member today. It's quite easy to do. Just go to our website at ksje.com/support and pick the level of support that best matches your budget. Thanks again for listening. Here's your podcast.
Good morning. This is Traci Hales with Right on Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington, New Mexico, and 103.3 in Durango, Colorado. Today I'm talking with James Wilson about the Fernando Lopez Santa Fe Mystery Series. We'll talk about The Dead Go Fast and Smokescreen. Hi, James. So tell me about writing these books.
I mean, I can tell you what my intentions were actually starting the series. You know, I've always been in love with New Mexico, especially northern New Mexico.
Yes.
You know, I moved here as a young man in the early to mid-'70s, and I wrote for the two newspapers in Santa Fe, the Reporter and the New Mexican. And I just, you know, I fell in love with the New Mexico landscape. It's magical.
It is.
You know, it's perfect for a fiction writer because it's just this haunted landscape, ancient landscape with these, you know, 1,200-year-old stone city ruins,
right.
You know, at Chaco Canyon and Aztec ruins and whatnot. So, and not only that, but it's layered with, you know, Native American, Hispanic, and Anglo cultures.
Absolutely.
So, you know, it just, you know, I enjoyed writing about it, doing features and such, but I also thought it would make a great setting for a mystery series. And my model, I mean, the mystery series that I've always loved, I didn't want to write a high-tech thriller kind of thing. That's not really what I want to do. But I love the classic American detective novel.
Right, me too.
Raymond Chandler was my favorite, and, you know, I loved his detective, Philip Marlowe.
Right.
And that how, you know, he made Los Angeles a presence in the story. It was a force that, you know, shaped the characters and, you know, the plot. And so I thought that, you know, Santa Fe, northern New Mexico would be just as good as that, you know, probably better in terms of, you know, shaping the story and the characters and whatnot. So then I, you know, created a detective who's loosely modeled on someone I knew, but also has a good deal of myself in, know, in terms of his cranky limitations and whatnot. You know, I mean, I try to include as much as myself as I can. And so that was the impetus. And then I wrote Peyote Wolf was the first one. Mm-hmm. And that one was, you know, this was my first one, and it was written, I started it way back in the 90s. And it was, you know, I had been reading a lot of Tony Hillerman's books. But, you know, he wrote most of his stuff in the 80s, and he was able to use the Navajo culture in an unabashed kind of way.
Right.
And I don't know that you can do that anymore.
Right.
I think that people are very sensitive about cultural, you know, appropriation.
Exactly.
So, you know, I did some of that in Peyote Wolf. I used a lot of Zuni stuff. But then after that, I stopped, and I didn't use any of that material again. I've stayed away from that. I mean, I have Native American characters that appear from time to time, but they're not. But I don't, you know, appropriate or use their culture in any way. So that's how I got started, and you know, I have a New York agent, but you know, and he sent Peyote Wolf around, and But, you know, he was only willing to work with, 4 or 5 big New York publishers. And every one of them said that, you know, they liked the book well enough, but they couldn't make any money off of it. You know, and they laughed and they said the only person they've ever heard of that made any money off of Southwestern stuff was Tony Hillerman. So at that point, I decided to take it to a regional publisher, and I've had really good luck with Sunstone in Santa Fe. They've you know, been very generous, and actually they're bringing out hard copies of the books now. I'm not exactly sure if they're, you know, I mean, after the Kindle version and the paperback, they're bringing out hard copies. So I'm sort of suspecting maybe they're library copies. They're hoping to sell to libraries. I don't know. Yeah, so that's where I am at the moment. I've done the 6th one is all ready to go. It's in press now, and that should be out later this fall. And I have a couple more already finished. So,
well, what I wonder, I don't want to give anything away, but I know that Fernando, is he going to be in the next ones?
Yes, in fact, yeah, he's the lead detective.
He is.
Yeah, but in I guess it's The Dead Go Fast.
Right.
Sometimes I get confused.
I bet.
So many. The Dead Go Fast is his last one as a police detective. At the end of that novel, he decides to become a private investigator.
Right. He was talking about retirement, and then he says, well, I could be a private eye. And you kind of left it like that, so I wonder.
Yeah, and so he does. And so the rest of them in the series are where he's a PI.
Oh, good.
And a lot of them are set in Taos, or at least partly in Taos, which I also love Taos a lot.
Fernando Lopez, middle-aged Hispanic detective, right?
Yes.
And
well, he's actually about 60 is how I envision him.
Oh, okay.
In his early 60s, and in Ghost Canyon, we discover that his father was Hispanic, but his mother was an Anglo, and that's why he's never been tribal in that sense. And you know, you learn more things about him as the series, you know, continues. But yeah, I envision him as about 60 years old, but still Sprite. You know, and, yeah.
That's why I thought he was a bit younger than that, but that works. And one thing I really like about the books I've read of yours is that, and you touched on this, but Santa Fe as a setting is very much a character in the book. And in The Dead Go Fast, you have the Canyon Road art community acting out in their artistic ways, I guess we should say.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And that, you know, when I lived there in the 70s, that was exactly what it was like.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yep.
But, and the characters are so real. They're just based on, and that's another thing. I mean, and you know, and Chandler was so good at this. The characters in his books were all real. They're real people. They're not these, you know, one-dimensional slick characters that you find in a thriller or something like that.
Right.
They're real people, and I really wanted that to be the situation here, because I have so much respect for these people that I, you know, that I've known many of them, not exactly, but I mean,
I understand what you're saying. Right. Yeah, and they definitely have developed their own characteristics, and even quote unquote the bad guy, they aren't all bad sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's right. I mean, I want even them to be real people. I have a kind of funny way of writing these things. I mean, I have usually I don't plot my books. I've tried that in the past, and you know, when I do fiction, I when I try to do that, it always feels like I'm doing homework. Fill in the blank, or you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. I do.
So I start with I try to think of just a situation, and a real dramatic situation, and a character that, like Jimmy Mackey, that stands out, that's very vivid.
Mm-hmm.
And then I write the first scene or so, and the other characters filter in, given the situation and the character. And really, I just let the characters carry the story. I mean, Aristotle said character is plot, and I think that's largely true. So, I let the characters just develop. I mean, they develop on their own, almost organically. I can't describe it. I think about it, I dwell on it, and even in my sleep, I'm dreaming about these characters, what they're going to do next.
Right.
And I kind of, and sometimes I have to make some corrections where they seem to go in the wrong direction or something. I'll
Come
have
back
to sort of refocus.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy, I know, but that's the way that I have to write. I just have to let it develop. Sometimes I'll know what I want to do at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time, I don't even know that, to tell you the truth. So that's my method, or
your process.
My absent method, maybe, of writing.
I ask my authors, too, if they're plotters or pantsers. And most either are pantsers or somewhere in between.
Yeah, interesting.
And it sounds like you're a classic pantser, right in front of the seat of the pants.
Yeah, you can say that. And, it's just been really fun for me because, during the pandemic, it just gave me something to do. And it really took off during those couple of years because I was homebound anyway, and it just really gave me something to do that I really loved. I mean, I've always loved writing, and I've always written a lot, but I'm a happy camper doing this. Well, I mean, I'm starting to get a little more feedback. It's really hard to get local press or coverage. In Santa Fe I don't know what you know about Santa Fe, but it's been Disneyfied by so much that it's very precious these days. And, but I'm going to be doing a reading for the Santa Fe Library.
Good.
Soon, and I'm getting other interviews. I think I mentioned my confusion about this Arizona interview that I had last week. So it's all been a lot of fun for me, and I sometimes I think maybe I should end it at some point, but then I have to start thinking about, well, who do I kill off?
It's true.
Can I stand to do that? Can I really do that? They're like friends,
They are like friends. And I know that you were a professor of English and journalism, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now,
at the University of Cincinnati, actually.
Wow, that's a different climate than Santa Fe and Albuquerque.
Yeah, well, what happened was that, after 7 or 8 years in Santa Fe, I was barely making a living, writing for these newspapers and then freelancing. I decided to go back. I had a master's degree. I grew up in Nebraska, and I had a master's degree from the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. And so I decided that I would go back and get a PhD at UNM so I could, teach at the college level and be gainfully employed.
Or something close to that anyway.
Something close, yeah.
Yeah.
So I did that. I went back and I got a PhD, and I met my wife in graduate school there. And we had a son in 1980, and he was born with a disability. So we needed jobs, right after I graduated, and insurance policy.
Yeah.
So luckily, we were lucky, though, but both of us found jobs teaching in Ohio, in the Cincinnati area. I taught at the University of Cincinnati for 30 years, and she taught at Miami University, Miami, Ohio.
Oh.
And, we would come back over the summers and vacations, frequently, all the time to New Mexico. And we knew that we were going to move back here when we retired. And I think 2012 we moved back. And so we came back.
But while you were teaching, did you always plan on writing?
Yeah, I did. In fact, I started Peyote Wolf when I was teaching there.
Mm.
And, I had to do all the scholarly stuff to get promoted and tenure and whatnot. And my wife and I were, we were both prominent in the first wave of disability studies. I don't know if you know about that. It's an interdisciplinary academic program or academic field.
Uh-huh.
And, it started in the early 2000s, and we both published widely in that. And plus I had done a lot of, I was first a Melvillian, publishing in Melville, which didn't last too long because nobody at Cincinnati cared about Melville or American literature. So, I did other things, more journalism-oriented. Mm-hmm. And then we got into disability studies, and we published several books. Oh. So I did that. I was always writing, one thing or another.
Right.
But, since I've been retired, and then I actually wrote a memoir about my son, fathering my son. Mm. And, but then when we moved back here and I had everything right at my fingertips, then, I started writing, picked up the series again and started writing that.
Well, I'm really glad you did. And I wonder if you said, you mentioned Raymond Chandler, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you were a reader of mysteries and police procedurals before you started writing them?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, but very limited. I mean, I loved, again, Raymond Chandler.
Right.
And of course, I read Tony Hillerman, everything that Tony wrote. I actually ran into him a few times at UNM.
Oh, of
and
course.
There are some other classic writers that I'm trying to think of that I liked early on. Dashiell Hammett.
Right.
Dashiell Hammett.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I read, all of his stuff, and there were a couple of other writers way back then. For some reason, I liked that 1940s and 50s kind of detective novel more than, what you see now. The high-tech thriller.
Right. And what I can see that influence in these books of yours that I read. They're the real whodunits. They're the let's dig down and do some gumshoe detective work. And I really like that. It seems to me it's much more relatable than some of the high-tech stuff.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I always thought so.
Mm-hmm. And I like Fernando, and can be grumpy sometimes, but
he can. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. I think we all get that way when we get older.
I think so too.
at least I did.
It helped to make him more real. So.
Right. Yeah.
And so, did you say you've already got two more after The Dead Go Fast?
Yeah. The next one is called Painted Skull Ranch.
Oh.
And it takes place primarily in Taos, but also in Santa Fe, too. I shouldn't say that. Then I go back to a all Santa Fe book set primarily on Canyon Road called Devil on Canyon Road. That'll be the one after that, which is, I also really like. It has a lot of these same characters that
good.
that Dead Go Fast have. And then I go back to Taos for yet a third one. And I'm working on the fourth one now, and I'm not sure. I think this is going to be primarily in Santa Fe, too. But, I don't want to say I got tired of Santa Fe, but I wanted to branch out and do some, to include Taos and some of the northern communities that I really love. And, there's so much history. And
absolutely. terrain and geography. And making Fernando go into private eye work gives him more territory he can roam around in, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was my intention.
I like
That's exactly right.
How does his wife feel about that?
Well, that's another interesting thing.
Yeah.
She's, as they go through, as I go through the series now, she is, well, she doesn't like it, for one thing. She wants him to stop, retire or whatever,
right.
as anybody would, you know. But she, they sort of moved apart a little bit because she's spending more time at her nonprofit job.
Mm-hmm.
She works for the St. Francis Immigrant Outreach Program through the St. Francis Cathedral.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nonprofit, but she works with providing new immigrants to the city, which is Santa Fe's a sanctuary city, with food and clothing and helping them get shelter and whatnot. And so he's kind of taken aback by all of the time she spends at work, and she's kind of taken aback by the fact that he won't stop his detective work. So
sounds like a balance.
So kind of, right? Yeah, it's a balance. But I had to do something. I thought they had to grow. They couldn't remain static. So,
right.
So there is growth through the stories.
Good. Now, one thing I have to mention, both on Smokescreen and The Dead Go Fast, the covers have beautiful artwork.
Well, yeah, that's another thing about Sunstone. I think that they do really a good job. And both of those photographs I use my own photos. Not to brag about my photos, but all the covers, for all the covers I've used my own photos.
Oh.
I've done professional photography too, for the newspapers and whatnot, and I have both it's a Facebook page for my writing, Southwest Writings, and then I have one for my photography, Southwest Images, through my Facebook page.
Oh.
And I post most of my photos there, the ones that I really like. And anyway, I've always been able to use my own photos for the covers.
Well, they're distinctive. They really stand out. I noticed them right away.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think they do a good job. The designer they have, at least up to this point, they've done a really good job.
That always helps that backup there.
Yeah,
Oh, that's great. So you've already finished these next few books. When will we expect to see them?
Well, the Painted Skull Ranch, the next one, is all done.
Great.
Cover, everything is the typeset, and they're just waiting on the, you get the cataloging information from the Library of Congress.
Right.
And that can take a while, but as soon as they get that, they'll send it to the printer. And I think it'll probably come out mid-fall.
Oh, good.
And, just probably a couple of months,
Great.
I would imagine. So unless the Library of Congress gets backed up, they've cut their staff apparently, and they've had a tough time keeping up.
Yes.
But it should be out this fall.
Great. So you write all the time. That's your job, right?
Every day, yeah. It's really I just write for maybe a couple hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I'll do a little editing too, because I like to. I have to edit my manuscripts. I don't have a reader or anything, so I make sure to do. I think it's usually 3 edits, total edits, content edits, at least, yeah, and then usually a 4th where I just look at copy editing stuff. But
right,
even there, I sometimes miss things. Copy editing is tough,
It is, especially when you've read your own script so many times. It's hard to.
Yes, it's hard to see the small things. Yeah. So you probably had that problem too, right? You're a writer.
I am a writer. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So you understand.
Oh yes. That's why I can definitely empathize with what you're saying there.
Yeah.
you mostly rely on, from what I'm understanding, the surroundings and the area around you. Do you do much research?
Well, I've done tons of research over the years about southwestern history and especially northern New Mexico. And for example, my Ghost Canyon, which is set primarily at Chaco Canyon, involves a lot of Chaco history, which I really love. Chaco Canyon. I go there every year to camp and hike. And so, I know a lot about these places and the whole Abiquiu and everything at Abiquiu and with George O'Keeffe and all the history of that, the Ghost Ranch and all that stuff, and Taos and the one that's forthcoming, the Painted Skull Ranch. There's a lot about 18th century Taos, and because the ranch itself is kind of modeled on the Martinez Hacienda in Taos, which is a couple hundred years old, and that's a museum now, and kind of hard to find, but it's open to the public. But also, and I managed to in one of my escapades with the detective tracing someone, he ends up in Cimarron at the old St. James Hotel, which is supposed to be the most haunted hotel in the state of New Mexico. It's right on the Santa Fe Trail. So, and I know about all these places, so sometimes it's fun to work them in,
I felt that when I was reading, let's see, I think it was, The Dead Go Fast, and they stayed there at the Ghost Ranch.
Right. Yeah. That and the whole O'Keeffe thing is fascinating, I think. Yeah.
Now, your second protagonist, Antonio, the big guy.
The big guy,
The big guy.
The enforcer.
He's very right. Where did he come from?
Well, he was, he's an imaginary figure.
Right.
I knew a couple people like that, but he's a total fiction.
I like him.
Something I created because I figured that Fernando needed somebody who was kind of an enforcer. Somebody who's gruff and who just seemed to work well. And the other guy, Manny, is
Manny.
He's a small little guy, and he's kind of the wise guy, always making jokes.
Right.
But they sort of both rely a little bit on Antonio because he's kind of fierce.
Right.
But, But he and Manny. Another character I love is the lawyer Garcia.
Right.
The old radical lawyer.
Yes.
Raul Garcia. Who's just right out of my experience in the 70s. I knew some of these lawyers.
Yes.
They weren't nearly as successful as Raul in the book, but so all of these characters have some connection with people I knew. But Antonio only very loosely. He's mostly a creation.
Well, he is certainly a full and well-rounded character. I like him a lot.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to reading the next ones.
Thank you for calling and your interest, and I will send you the next one when it comes out. I'll send you a copy.
I would really appreciate that, and then we can talk about it. Good.
Yeah, sure. Or that would be great too.
Absolutely.
But
so listeners can find you on your Facebook page.
Yes, James C. Wilson. They can just look me up.
Okay.
And I have all of my connections, my news will appear there.
Great.
And on my that's connected to my Southwest Writings page on Facebook.
Okay.
And of course, I have an Amazon author page too.
Yes.
I used to have a website, but it never really got as many hits as Facebook or Amazon. So I just,
I'm finding that to be the trend lately, is that fewer authors are making their own websites and going instead to Facebook and Amazon. So
yeah, well, it's just easier to reach so many people on the social media sites. So yeah,
absolutely. That was James C. Wilson talking about his Santa Fe Mystery Series, The Fernando Lopez Detective. James was talking to us from Albuquerque about his book set in northern New Mexico. This is Traci Hales with Right On Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington, New Mexico, and 103 FM, Durango, Colorado.
Did you enjoy that podcast? We hope that you did. And if you did, share it with your friends. And if you really want to keep podcasts like this coming, please support KSJE. You can do it easily online at ksje.com.